Your journey is backwards from a lot of landlords. You bought a business in commercial property and then decided to scale a portfolio.
Yeah. So right now I own a wine and liquor store. I own a commercial plaza. And then together with a partner, I own 44 residential units as well. For my situation, I was trying to get out. I was trying to create a new job for myself. I was perfectly fine with buying a job at first.
Today, I'm talking with Tim Delaney, who you may have heard on the Bigger Pockets Rookie podcast. Tim's approach to real estate was completely backwards from most investors. He actually started by buying a business with only 10% down and then slowly scaled his rental portfolio to 44 doors. He's completed a lot of highly profitable flips, and he's here to share how he did it. We talk about how he scaled that portfolio, how he runs his flips, what to look for if you're interested in buying a business, and how he bought an entire shopping plaza using creative finance. All that and more up next. Welcome, friends. My name is Brady. This is my wonderful co-host, Ebony. Ebony, how you doing today?
Hey guys, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. And I'm joined by our wonderful guest, Tim Delaney. Welcome to the podcast, Tim. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Brady. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, Ebony.
Absolutely.
Tim, we got to meet at Bigger Pockets, BPCon, and you actually were on a panel with a few other RentRedi customers and our CEO, Ryan. So that was a pleasure to get to be a part of and watch that. The reason I brought you on is because it's fascinating. Your journey is backwards from a lot of landlords. I think most landlords, most real estate investors just assume that you have to start small, as in like get a small house or like the cheapest thing you can afford, which is fine. But you bought a business in commercial property and then decided to scale a portfolio. So let's kick this off by just telling me like how many doors you got right now, and like give me the timeline here. What did you do?
Yeah. Bigger picture right now, I own a wine and liquor store. I own a commercial plaza with 8 commercial units and two apartments. And then together with a partner, I own 44 residential units as well. The liquor store I purchased in 2013, so we're coming up on 13 years here. The commercial plaza I closed in January 2019. And then the residentials began in about the middle of 2020.
So, for context, what did life look like before you were full-time investing?
That is a great question. Prior to buying the liquor store, I was mostly living overseas. So from college, I joined the Peace Corps. I lived down in Guyana in South America. And then my wife, who I met there, and I moved to Ethiopia for about 4 years. I was working for a governmental program, kind of industrializing the country of Ethiopia. So we decided to move back to Buffalo in 2010 to be closer to my family. And I was still working remotely while I was trying to start businesses, and then ended up deciding to buy a business instead of starting from scratch. And that's where the liquor store came in. I owned that, so from 2013 to 2017, 2018, I was kind of there full time every day, working all the time. And then in 2019, bought the plaza, and then started getting much more interested in real estate in general. And then in 2020, it kind of went full time, full bore into buying residential units. We did some flips. We bought and used the BRRRR method on some. It had kind of a checkered, interesting, all different things before getting into real estate.
So I have a question. The idea of buying a business is just like right over my head.
Sam.
So if I decided that I wanted to buy a business tomorrow, right? And I had the great credit and all of that, how would you go about getting financing? Where would you find a business to buy? Like, you have blown my mind.
I'm guessing that you're into real estate as well, Ebony?
Yeah, I am.
You own some properties?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So what was the first step you took when you went to go buy a house? Look on the MLS, look on Zillow, like that kind of thing?
If I can be honest, it just kind of just accidentally. It's something I was going to do, but it kind of accidentally fell into my lap. I was trying to buy a house for me. So I just went to realtor.com and looked for multifamily properties, and found something I was in love with and bought it sight
Yep.
unseen.
So that sounds crazy to me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, went right over my head. Buying a multifamily I never saw. That sounds wild, but it's kind of, business is kind of the same thing. Like so you go, there's websites out there called like bizbuysell.com or LoopNet. LoopNet, a lot of commercial real estate investors are familiar with. They also have business listings. You kind of look around, you see what's out there. You call the brokers, you have some conversations. Banks are very willing to fund businesses. There's a lot of different programs that they can tap into as well. So if, just like with real estate, there are some banks that will do those a lot of more so than real estate. A lot of those loans are portfolio loans. So the bank will keep that loan for themselves. They collect the interest, but they can also tap into other programs. So the Small Business Administration, the SBA, is a federal program that backs the loans. So they don't buy them like Freddie and Fannie, but they tell the bank that if you follow these guidelines and if you approve the loan under these stipulations, the business has to be XYZ, then we will back up 80% of that loan. So if the business goes bad, we'll give, the SBA will give the bank 80% of their money back. And then the SBA will go after the business owner. So to try to collect whatever they can later on. So the bank doesn't have to be the one to go do that. So that's, and then there's private lenders. There's a lot of times the business owners are much more familiar with seller financing and that concept. So they're happy to finance it. So for example, when I bought my liquor store, I used a little bit of cash. I came up with about 10% down of the purchase price. I got a seller note for another 10%. And then the bank gave me a loan for 85%. So I had 105% of the purchase price at closing. Some of that was my own cash, obviously, but in theory, I could have only come with 5%. But the bank wanted to see that check just to go in, at least at the beginning. So there's a lot of options out there, and it's just a matter of, finding the business is the tough part. It's not as fast as real estate because there's less options out there, and it takes a little bit more due diligence and review before you get comfortable with it.
So once you sign the dotted line, it's your business. Do you have to figure out how to work it, or does the owner teach you, or are you just figuring it out?
It depends on you and the owner or the seller. Every deal's a little bit different. So for me, the sellers were cool with me going into the store regularly before we closed the deal. So I was able to kind of start learning before we even closed, so that I think in the contract we had like a 2-month window where they were going to stick around a couple days a week. But in reality, I didn't even need them. So by the time we closed, they had taught me enough that so it was in their interest to teach me before we closed, because then they didn't have to come to work. So they just said, I was like, we're good. I don't need you. I'll call you if I have questions. I definitely bought it as a job, and you'll hear people, if you listen to enough content about buying businesses, you'll hear some people say, don't buy yourself a job, buy a business. Yeah, that's fine. If you're looking to be a completely passive investor, that's good advice. But for my situation, I was trying to get out of a job that I didn't want anymore. I was trying to create a new job for myself. I was trying to start a business, which would have been my own job anyway. So I was perfectly fine with buying a job at first and knowing that I was going to work towards getting myself out of the day-to-day once I had grown it to a point that I was comfortable.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a fast way to climb the ladder. You skipped all the rungs. You became owner and CEO.
Yeah, instead of working my way up through middle management, I just bought my way there, essentially.
So let's talk about your real estate portfolio. What's your strategy?
Yeah, so I started seriously thinking about real estate in 2018. I happened to be at lunch with my business banker and the branch manager. And I said I told them, I'm thinking about getting into real estate. And the branch manager got all excited. And he's like, well, I do real estate. He's like, this is what I do. I buy rundown old houses. I fix them up. I rent them out. And then I go to a bank and get a loan and get all my money back. And then I go do it again. So he described what we call now the BRRRR process. He didn't know that name. I didn't know that name. It was just something he had been doing for years and was working for him. So I was like, that sounds like a good concept. So I started in 2019, late 2018, I started looking at options to do that. And then my Plaza opportunity came up, so focused on that until we closed in January 2019. And then I started looking again later in 2019, but my biggest hang up was the renovation part. I'm not a super handy person. I did not have the time and energy to go do the rehabs myself. I didn't know how to hire good contractors. And so I made a couple offers, but they weren't very strong offers because I was way overestimating the rehab just to give myself a buffer. And then in early 2020, I talked to a guy that I knew who was a contractor who I had had some business relationships with in the past through another venture that I did part-time. And I knew him, I mostly trusted him, and he mentioned something about real estate. And I said, well, you know what? The only thing I'm missing in my process is a good contractor. You're a contractor, and the only thing you're missing is money and somebody that can manage the finances. So we decided to partner on a flip. So we found a flip, we did it, worked really well. And then we decided to partner on a couple BRRRR houses. And then we started doing that, and it started working. And then we just kept going from there.
Interesting.
So y'all are literal partners.
Yeah. So we set up the first couple, we didn't really set up anything formal. It was just 50-50 agreement on the flips and the BRRRRs. He's going to handle the rehab. I was handling the money and the finances and putting the tenants in. And then it was maybe 2021, we actually established real entities, one for flipping, one for holding, and kind of went full steam. And that's, we structured it equal 50-50. As I talk to people all the time, and he talks to people all the time. And when we tell them our arrangement, there are always people that say, you're getting way too much of the deal, or you're getting, screwed on the deal. But it works for us. And so that's what we do. It's been working really well.
Well, I feel like it being sustainable is the most important thing rather than like, is it because fair is so subjective and everybody's going to have a different split or a different agreement. But I've talked with investors for so long, and I've heard so many horror stories of investors partnering up with GCs, and most of the time it just doesn't work out. And so your GC, like, you had a previous relationship with them, you trusted him well enough. You said, what do you think people could learn from Tim from that relationship? Like, what made that work well, in that first flip where it didn't go sour?
Yeah, I think the trust piece is huge. And then, before we jumped in and started forming entities and buying a lot of real estate, we did that one flip. We went into it saying, all right, let's do a flip together. It wasn't a high enough purchase price, and there wasn't a massive risk that I felt like, okay, if this goes south, the ways it could have gone south for me is he just decided to not work on it, or he took way too long to do it, or something of that nature, which would have tied up capital for much longer than it needed to be. But I could have always just put it back on the market and sold it for, maybe took a loss and gotten out of it. It could have gone wrong for him if I didn't have enough money. It's not like he analyzed my financials and made sure that we had enough cash and enough credit to get it all done. But we were both willing to take a chance on that first one, knowing that we would be doing more if it went well. So we're both kind of incentivized to make sure it went well so that we could keep doing more.
I tend to find that people always have opinions on things that are not really their business. So of course they're going to say, oh, you're getting too little or he's getting too little. But the truth of the matter is a 50-50 split is a win-win for everybody. So everybody's going to do what they're supposed to do because we're all winning.
Exactly. I'd rather have 50% of what we have right now than 100% of nothing that I would have otherwise.
So here we are 40 plus units later. That's a lot to manage. Talk to me about like, what are you doing well as a landlord, that our audience can learn from?
Well, I made the decision the first rental that we had, a single family house, to set up RentRedi as my property management software. And I did that because I knew that we were gonna grow, and I wanted to make sure that I had the systems in place from the very start. So I looked at a bunch of different software, decided on RentRedi, and set it up with one unit. Setting up those systems from day one makes your life a lot easier rather than having to go back and do it.
What were the most important systems? Like, we're talking just payments. What were the things you had to have at the beginning?
Yeah, for me, the payments was the most important piece. I didn't want people mailing checks. I didn't want to go pick up cash. I didn't want any of that. I wanted the money to go into my bank account without having to think about it. And that was the priority feature. Now it's the lease end of lease notification. So with 44 tenants, like trying to keep track of when different leases end and who's late on their payments. So I love now that I get all those notifications on a regular basis, when the leases are expiring, which ones are coming up in 30, 60, 90 days. Cause I'm in New York State. I need to give people 90 days notice if I'm going to raise their rent. So, or if I'm going to end their lease.
Yeah, that's great. Rather than taking up like all this mental bandwidth of like, oh, when's that lease coming up?
Yep.
Just weighing on you. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Or having to scroll through a spreadsheet every month and remember to check off which ones are coming up or not. It's, so having all those things systematized, again, right from the start makes life a lot easier.
Well, cool, man. I appreciate you sharing that. We got a 10-minute tactic coming up in a second where we're going to hear about this Plaza that you bought. Is there anything else you feel like would be worth sharing, like from your growing your portfolio?
I think just being willing to take a chance here and there is important. It's like Ebony buying a multifamily sight unseen. Like we bought 28 units in one package deal. It was 7 quadplexes in the same neighborhood.
So did y'all BRRRR 28 units?
Yeah, that 28 unit deal we bought with private money. It took us about a year to get through all 28 units.
Dang.
A little bit over a year. Some tenants left right away. Some tenants stayed with us and we renovated around them and raised their rent. Some tenants switched units as we were going through, but we got through most of it. We didn't fully renovate all 28 units right at the beginning. We did maybe about 20 and then we refinanced it into a longer term loan.
That seems pretty quick for 28 units.
It does.
Yeah, we went very fast because it was a very large private money note with a lot of interest. So
yeah,
we were trying to go as quickly as we possibly could.
So was the rents enough to cover the big loan payments, or were you guys having to come out of pocket for some of that?
For most of the months, the rents were covering the interest payments. We had a couple partners on that deal as well, so we had some cash to work with in addition to the loan. I think on that deal we borrowed the purchase price from the private lender. We each put in some cash along with our partners, so we had some cash to work with. We had the rents coming in that covered the interest payments and the insurance, and then some of the taxes. And then it mostly was able to make things meet throughout that process. There were a couple times where we ran credit card balances. I think we used a line of credit on my business for a little bit here and there. And then especially towards the end, when we got closer to the refinance, when we had all the new rents in place, it was doing well.
For sure. That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Before we head in this 10-minute tactic, Ebony, hit me with a smart tip for landlords. What do we got?
Absolutely. A simple way to reduce your tax liability as a landlord is by tracking mileage. Now inside the RentRedi mobile app, our desktop app, you can add mileage and have it all automatically show up in your Schedule E. So you can keep more money in your pocket at tax season.
That's awesome. I'm super excited about that. One thing we also rolled out recently is now the RentRedi app connects to your bank account too. So for expense tracking, you just have it automatically connect. Expenses come in, shows up on your P&L, Schedule E. So yeah, it's making things a lot more simple, which is really cool. Okay, so Tim, you bought this shopping plaza. You told me this was $1 million shopping plaza with no money. I'd love if you could walk us through this deal, what you learned, how you did it, because Ebony wants to do it.
I do.
Yeah. So this plaza was where my liquor store sits in. When I bought the liquor store, the owners of the store were not the same as the owner of the plaza. So I only bought the liquor store, and I had to sign a lease with the owner of the plaza, John. It's another good thing about using bank financing to buy a business is they look for all those little things like, hey, do you have a lease there? And turns out the people that sold me the liquor store didn't even have a lease anymore because they were both so old school. They just did things on handshakes and they paid their rent and everything was good. So I met John when I had to sign, write a new lease and sign a lease with him. And then I knew John because he also had an office. He was a real estate agent. He had an office in the plaza as well. I paid rent every month with a check. So I saw him at least once a month, usually. He would stop in the store, see how things were going. So we had a good working relationship throughout, from 2013 to 2018. And throughout that time, I always would tell him, on a regular basis that I would like to buy the plaza. And he would always say, I will die with the plaza because I don't want to pay capital gains. Because he built it all in the 70s. So it was, fully depreciated. Commercials, 39 years of depreciation. But so he had a zero basis on it and didn't want to pay the capital gains. And then in the summer of 2018, he told me when I went to pay my rent, he said, hey, just so you know, I'm repaving a section of this parking lot. And he started complaining about how expensive it was. And I kind of said to him, half joking, John, and you still want to deal with this thing? Aren't you ready to sell it yet? And he turned to me and said, yes, I'm ready to sell. It's like, here's what I'm thinking. He's like, $1 million. I'll finance 90% of it. You put 10% down, 6% interest, 20-year loan with a 3-year balloon. I was like, sounds good. Sure, let's do it. Shook hands. And then I, obviously needed to do some research, dig into the numbers and everything. So he gave me all of his financials, which weren't fantastic. He was not using any property management software. As I said, most of the tenants didn't have leases because just old school. I mean, it would have been impossible to finance it with a bank at that point because of the no lease situation. Because we had such a good relationship, he was, he let me, go talk to the other tenants, make sure that they were all going to stick around. Then I had to figure out where I was going to get the 10% from because I didn't have $100,000 laying around. And I decided that the $1 million or the 6% wasn't really going to work. So first thing I did is went back to him, and I knew that $1 million price point, like psychologically, wasn't going to be easy to come down on, to try to get him to knock 40, 50 grand off the price and go into the 900s. As somebody that's selling something, psychologically, $1 million sounds way better than 947,000. So instead of trying to get him to go down in the price, I decided to try to get him to come down on the interest rate. So we got down to 4% on the interest rate instead of 6%. And then I went out and found that $100,000 from a private lender, which I got on a 25-year note at a 5% interest rate with no balloon. So that is ongoing. And his term, I think his terms were originally a 3-year balloon. I think we got that up to a 4 or 5-year balloon, 5-year balloon. And then, so we refinanced that. Well, and I guess that's how I got it. So a private lender gave me 10%. He gave me 90%. And I paid some closing costs out of pocket. And that was it.
So I'm curious, what are you doing to get private money? Any tips for us there?
That, I was lucky to have a family member that was willing to go into the retirement for. So if you have family or friends with decent sized retirement accounts that especially that as they get up there in age, and their financial advisors usually shift them into bonds instead of stocks. Those bond rates aren't, they're not making a fortune on those bond rates anyway. So if you can give them a decent interest rate on their loans, might be more willing to do that. A lot of times they don't know what they can do. They can use their self-directed IRAs to lend on those assets. So with like that deal was done with creative financing. People call it creative financing. I was kind of lucky that that's just what the seller proposed right from the start. So it's not like we got crazy creative, but there's a lot of opportunities out there like that. From my perspective, it doesn't need to be a strategy to go out there and say, I'm using only creative financing. It's just one tool in the tool belt of real estate that you can tap into if it fits right.
Yeah.
The
That's awesome.
idea that he went from never going to sell it, I'm done with the property, to actually having the financing laid out. This is what I'll do. It's crazy to me.
I think the few months prior to that, he had started talking to somebody and realized that his, so capital gains, when the sellers finance a purchase, they spread those capital gains out over time. So in the first year, he only needed to pay the capital gains on that $100,000 that he got. And then in the subsequent years, he was only paying capital gains on the principal portion of my loan. So, or on my loan payments. So it really, it didn't ultimately eliminate the capital gains for him, but it minimized them up front. And then, unfortunately he did pass away last year. And so his heirs inherit the note at a stepped up basis. So now they don't have any capital gains on that note. So they're paying, I think they have regular income taxes on the interest portion, but other than that, they were, so it's kind of like inheriting the building at a stepped up basis. There's no capital gains anymore. So I think somebody had educated him on that, and had I known that, this is one of the reasons that it's great to listen to podcasts and read books and all that kind of stuff, because had I known that 4 years, 5 years earlier, I might have been able to propose that to him and teach him about it. And we might have done that deal, 5 years earlier.
Oh, that's really cool. Well, thanks for sharing that, man. Yeah. I appreciate that. And I love the sentiment about there's a lot of buzz around creative finance right now. It's been around a long time. It's not anything new and flashy. It just gets called different things, but it's just one tool in the tool belt. So put more tools in your tool belt. I think that's the takeaway.
Yes,
cool,
exactly.
Man. Well, I appreciate this. Before we bounce, I want to do a quick little fire round. So I got a couple questions. Ebony's got two. I did not prep you for this. Number one, what are your top tools you rely on for real estate investing?
RentRedi, I'm in almost every day for property management, or at least a few times a week. And probably ChatGPT at this point. Double checking contracts, double checking insurance stuff. Probably those two. Okay,
nice. And then what's a book that changed your life, and tell me the problem that it solved? And it can't be Rich Dad Poor Dad.
The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy.
Yeah.
I have a new practice that I do most nights since I read the book. I write down 3 of my wins for the day, and I write down 3 of my must-dos for the next day, with the caveat that it can't be things that have to get done anyway. Like, I don't write down run payroll for my store, because that's just something that has to get done. Or I don't say, brush my teeth, like things like that. It's got to be things that are going to materially move the needle that I might not have done otherwise.
Nice. I like that. I've heard that book recommendation a couple times. I actually have a couple close friends that swear by that book. That was massively instrumental for them.
Yep. It's great. I mean, and that's just one that's like the practical takeaway I got out of it, but the mindset takeaways are huge as well. Of thinking about things, comparing where you are to where you were, not where you want to be. So, instead of saying, oh man, I'm so frustrated that I don't have $10 million of real estate yet. It's like, no, look back and say, 5 years ago, I didn't have any real estate. Now I have 44 doors. Like, be happy and, of that rather than be frustrated with what you don't have.
We forget how far we've come without like a gratitude adjustment to reset us. Yeah.
Yep.
So for me, what's your advice for someone who wants to be where you are?
For starters, take a chance on yourself, believe in yourself, listen or read as much as you can about real estate, business, whatever it is that you're interested in. That's, that kind of changed changed everything for me. I was in the car 40 minutes each way for a number of years before getting into real estate. And that's when I started listening to podcasts, business podcasts, marketing podcasts, real estate podcasts. And it kind of has really helped, put a lot more tools in my tool belt from a business perspective, from a real estate perspective. So, just educate, get to some conferences, go get around people that are doing the things that you want to do, whether it's just locally, chambers of commerce meetings, business meetups, whatever, real estate meetups. Get around the people that are doing what you want to do.
That's awesome. That's good advice, man. That's great advice. That's a good way to close it out.
Absolutely.
Where
Thanks.
can people connect with you? I know you have podcasts. So yeah, what's your podcast? Where can people find you?
My podcast is called Business Buying for Financial Independence.
Nice.
I talk about my story about buying a business and interview others that have bought businesses to let people know what's out there. I have a website called powerofbiz.com, B-I-Z. Or you can find me mostly on Threads these days, but also Instagram at Tim T. Delaney.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you again for hopping on, man. It's been fun. I'm glad we met at BPCon. I appreciate you being a RentRedi customer all these years. And thanks for hopping on and sharing your story with us, man.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone watching, listening, if you enjoyed this, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us build momentum while the show is new. If you enjoyed it, tell a friend. Until then, we will see you on the next episode.